Salutations, everyone! Welcome back to Total War Pharaoh. I'm Lord Forwind, and today I've got a guide for you on how to play Ramesses, the historical winner of this time period. So, if you guys do like this, like, subscribe, comment, those good things. I'm going to try and divide this video into several sections, timestamp them below so you can skip to what you're interested in. So let's jump right into it. Ramesses, later Ramesses the Great, was the historical winner of this struggle in this period, and his faction heavily reflects his strength. He is, played properly, the strongest faction on the map, I believe. So we'll just quickly go over his strengths and weaknesses, and then we'll talk about strengths and weaknesses of the campaign map, and then move on from there. So most of this is summarized. His buildings are really good with happiness and production, as well as getting units up to high levels quickly. One of your major strengths, strong units that recruit quickly and lack of rebellions. Downside is you can only build them in your province capitals, which, to be honest, you should own your province capitals anyway, because minor settlements are not particularly good at keeping provinces stable on their own. You have access to the Magi, who are good units. They have their place. Later on, you really need to upgrade them. You have also access to the Sheridan, which are decent units that can flank and do other stuff. They're worth using early on. Towards the late game, you want to get more elite units than your default Magi and Sheridan. The big benefit for Ramesses is his command, is he can allow his armies to attack in march stance with no stamina penalty. You will use this a lot in your campaign, and if you're not, you're doing something wrong. It allows Ramesses to race around the map faster than pretty much everyone else and attack immediately. Most factions have to march and then take a turn to switch into a normal stance before they can actually attack, or go slowly and risk and not risk it being attacked in a march stance. Ramesses doesn't really care. Also, if he does not use that benefit, he has Magi for special recruitment in the armies, which is really powerful. It allows you to recruit them anywhere. If you played Total War Hammer, you would know this is like Regiments of Renown recruitment or something. And probably the most powerful of Ramesses' abilities in many ways is he gets 2 court actions rather than 1. He does twice as much in the court, allows you to gain a lot more legitimacy, stop plots. It kind of summarizes it's there, but it bears mention that it's a very powerful ability, and arguably I think his best one. Outside of that, he's got some titles that allow your units to specialize in units. He worships Ra. Ra is pretty good for both chariots, but more importantly, devoting generals to them can give some crazy bonuses to combat ability. And in terms of his outposts, he gets the standard Egyptian way station and the Shrine of Ra. So, now I've read what you guys could have read on your own. Let's get into the actual benefits here. Let me turn the map so it's a little bit more accurate to the real world. So Ramesses starts in Sinai Peninsula, and right off the bat, he's in a decent position, but he has some major problems. First off, he only controls 2 starting areas, one of which is food, the other is copper. Bronze. So he has access to better units, mid-tier units immediately.
I'll find a way to prove myself.
He's talking, of course. The big downside here is even after you take the rest of your provinces, you're going to be lacking with food. The Sinai is not entirely a desert, but it's certainly not the lush Egyptian delta, meaning it will be difficult for you to support armies early on. That's a pretty big problem. The other one was his starting area has no gold and no stone. The closest stone is owned by another Egyptian faction here, which may be worth taking, or the other option is to go south to the Sinai, the bottom of the Sinai, where there is a free stone settlement as well. Outside of that, there's another copper, but there is no easy access to gold, so you get over here to Hathor. The reality is getting to Hathor, as great as it is, and as much as that would help your expansion, you're probably going to be distracted by the Egyptian civil war before you can expand in that direction.
We live in an age of prosperity.
So the big benefits you want to think of first is getting your copper mine up, because as much as we have a decent income of copper, we will very quickly exceed it when each unit costs 24 to 27 copper, plus the recruitment cost of 100 something. So it's not as much copper as you would think. Keeping it going is very powerful. The other thing to realize is you desperately are going to need food. So building food buildings is very useful. This pig farm in particular. And the other thing is happiness. So the commoner's graveyard would help with that. Now, what are your biggest weakness on the campaign map? Well, it's the lack of stone. We've already kind of talked about how handling it, but this is the amount of stone you're going to have to get a stone mine, or you find someone willing to trade. The problem is, outside of copper, you don't have much else to trade. Your units here, the Medjay swordsmen, are nice. They're slightly smaller than your average group of units. They don't tend to rout, in my experience. They tend to pretty much die where they stand, but they do have trouble actually beating people armed with axes and stuff. The swordsmen. Early on, the chargers help a lot because they're armor piercing, unlike your swordsmen. And overall, I would pick the chargers over the swordsmen, in my opinion. The archers are not that useful, really. I haven't found them to be super strong. I mean, they do get kills, but it takes a long time to get through the opposing side's armor. Not as long if you use chargers, though. So let's talk about the opening moves for Ramesses. So they're pretty obvious. They are, take out this army here. You can take Sukkot here in the first turn, unlike some other factions, if you want. Or you can spend a turn recruiting in your territory and then take it. It doesn't make a ton of difference. The point is you want to get to Azati by turn 3 or 4 at the latest, before they can rebuild the army. So you want to fight, either take the city or recruit, take the city, recruit again, take this next city. Once you do that, you will control your starting area. You'll be able to stick in your starting commandments. I recommend Royal Gardens or Organized Festivals. I would wait on Organized Festivals, though, till you've built up your army a bit. You will probably very quickly start running a food deficit. Thankfully, some of these Sukkots have fishing grounds, which will help a bit. It will not solve your food problems, though. The reality is, even though you have access to the Medjay units, you're not going to want to use too many of them. Maybe 2 chargers or swordsmen, and that's about it. You're going to be wanting to rely on the Heberu militia a lot more. These are pretty good units. Don't underestimate this. For a starting unit, these militia are pretty good. They're strong against shields, they're expendable, and more importantly, they only cost food. So a 190 food bringing building allows you to build almost 3 of them for the cost of basically 1 Medjay unit. And the difference right now is not substantial enough that you need the higher level units, because you're mainly fighting people who are level 1 units anyhow. Now, Ramesses himself has access to various competencies that are unique for him. The big one, and you want to remember to put this on the first turn, is the First of Shadana. If you're going to recruit Sheridan units and just recruit anything, +2 recruitment rank is really nice. Later on, you're going to want to get Shield of the Medjay. Probably around level 8, this will be your second one you take. Melee defense +8 in the whole army is amazing. And more importantly, the recruitment rank for your Medjay units stacks with this one to be recruiting at least level 4 units. You can get Desert Immunity as well if you want to focus in it. You're going to have to go out of your way to get it, though, because that's your lowest stat, so you won't get it till at least level 3. The reality is, if you're building Egyptian way stations everywhere, which you should probably do, you don't necessarily need this ability. Can be useful if you don't want to build Egyptian way stations, or you run out of stone and you can't afford to build them. That happened to me in one of my games. Later on, you've got several other bonuses, but for now, think about getting the recruitment ranks, and then think about potentially getting this one, Movement Restored After Battle. This will help you really rocket around the map, because it'll allow you to defeat an army and go in and take a settlement rather than sometimes having to wait a turn. You also gain bonuses later on to morale and stuff. Basically, it's your standard build up. I would recommend early on for Ramesses that you focus into replenishment. That is his weakest stat right now. Maybe throw 1 point into upkeep, his presence here, which is the upkeep tree, just to get to level 3. But then I would put a lot into fortitude to get that lovely recruitment rank. If you get to 5, the melee defense is also very strong. You've got enough movement speed, so at the early game, you don't need to worry about that. Replenishment, on the other hand, right at the beginning of the game, you've got the bonus towards replenishment because the world is in a stable culture. But as soon as the world plunges into crisis or collapse, that replenishment rate goes negative, and it's very hard to rebuild your armies unless you have gone down the fortitude tree. In fact, you may even want to go further just so that you have replenishment once the civilization slips into crisis or even further into collapse. Otherwise, you're not going to really be replenishing units and spending time to build a building to support that. Where is that one? Oh, maybe it's only in the capital. Spending time and effort to get a replenishment building going can... Actually, I don't think he has one. Maybe. Oh, there it is. Midwife's house. The 3 replenishment, you really don't want to have to build this. You can. By and large, it's not worth building. You're better off building other things. The other thing you probably want to do on the first or second turn is either consider throwing down a pig farm. Gives you happiness, influence, and food income. Everything you need in this province. It's a good building. The other option you want to consider throwing down is the Commoner's Graveyard, which will give you influence and happiness, and when you build it up, will spread to neighboring lands, which will help keep your realm stable. I would probably recommend you go for the pig farm first, especially if you're going to at all use any Majay units, because you need the food. Later on, you want to think more along the lines of definitely getting a movement in going, especially if you're fighting on 2 fronts. This is really useful for getting your troops in the positions where you need to be. If you're going to just focus on Egypt, not as useful. The other thing to remember is you probably want to get a city guard station at some point and upgrade it all the way to city guard compound, just in case somebody goes for your capital. You don't want it to fall, because at the beginning of the game, it's how you recruit your Majay and how you recruit your Sheridan. So you're definitely going to want to protect that as much as you can. At some point, you may want to do native muster field, but the reality is you don't necessarily need it. You've got pretty much better units than what you can get otherwise. The Habaru Raiders, though, are quite nice if you can get your hands on them. You could always throw it down in a minor settlement. Later on, you're going to want to throw down a military office in the capital so that you get that higher recruitment rank. You can end up recruiting level 8 or 9 units without trying too hard, so long as they're in Ramesses' army and he's got the correct titles and stuff on. Now, one thing you may not want to do is put time and effort into this recruitment hall. Yes, it will allow your buildings to be built cheaper and quicker, but you're still going to run out of stone anyway. It will help with that for the short amount of time, but your starting province is already rather built up, so building that building will slow down your access to stuff like the food, happiness, and influence buildings. It's your call. I wouldn't necessarily do it. Don't make the mistake of going into chariots early. You're not going to be able to support them. The reality is, even though you've got the copper income, you're going to need another 1, maybe 2 copper. So bronze. I don't know why I keep saying copper. Bronze settlements to support chariots, and early on, they're not going to win battles for you. This whole tree here of the production, you probably can just ignore it outside of the winery. The winery is really good for Ramesses. It's a unique building. The production of resources in the province, as well as the happiness, makes that an invaluable building. I wouldn't build it first, but once you upgrade, it's worth throwing into a slot if you've got a spare one. Don't go down into the woodcutters district. Really, it's not worth it. Unlike the pig farm, although upgrading your woodcutting complex, if you have time, is good. You're going to want a lot of wood for when you invade Egypt to build up farming buildings and stuff. In terms of the Temple of Ra, you can build it. I wouldn't necessarily build it and waste a capital slot. It's going to be much more productive for you to build religious outposts, places that will strengthen your melee defense and give you favor. You shouldn't need the happiness. Ramesses has plenty of happiness buildings. between his graveyard, between his winery, between his pig farm, behind the basic royal decree that gives you +3, your capital should be pretty stable. Now, the key point is, where do you go after you take Azati? You have two choices. You can head south down here to get stone, or you can go to Jaru. Now, I have tested this several times. As soon as you will take one of this faction settlements, they own 2, the other will almost always become a vassal of this guy, Merneptah. Meaning you will either have to make peace with them or declare war on a much stronger faction that has several vassals and will come for you, and will come for you very hard. The reality is, you should just take Chijaru. If you're going to rush in there and take one of the 2 settlements, this is the one you want for the stone. On the other hand, you're going to be dealing with unhappiness. The stone productivity is decent, but you won't own the whole region, so you won't be able to throw down any commandments. The better outcome I found was to start marching south through Hetch down to this province, Deshret Rithu. I have no idea how to say these names, by the way. However, in order to do that, starting on your first or second turn, you want to build an Egyptian way station down in your capital area. And in general, you want to throw down Egyptian way stations almost every province in your land, just so you don't have no desert problems at all. Plus, interacting with that outpost will give you the additional movement speed to help you rocket around the map. In one of my campaigns, I managed to make it from Hetch almost all the way up to Jaru in one move, or a little bit further. So that's how far Ramesses can go if you've got a proper setup of outposts to help. Do be aware, and I do want to point this out here, the Egyptian, one of these, I think it's the Egyptian fort, seems to be glitched right now in terms of refunding movement. Hopefully they'll patch that, but that may be a thing, because everyone says interacting will refund. I'm not finding it happening with the fort right now. After you have taken Hetch out, which should be pretty easy so long as you attack when their army is outside of the settlement. It is a capital, though, so it has walls, so you're going to have to take a turn to siege it down. A full stack of Ramesses units should have no trouble with it. Then it's worth rushing over here, snagging this. At that point, you may find you're running out of bronze, in which case you want to march up here and take Timnah. Now, at that point, assuming you're moving right along, the Egyptian Civil War should be kicking off. So, there's an achievement to get involved at the beginning and win it. The reality is, winning the first Egyptian Civil War as Ramesses is very hard. Seti, Zarat, and the others have way more legitimacy than you at the beginning of the game, and they have a better position. They're going to have more Egyptian sacred lands, meaning if you want to join the war at that, pretty much as soon as you conquer Hathor here, Timnah, you need to race back over here and prepare an immense invasion of the Egyptian territories. Now, Menefer here, Pharaoh, Merneptah, he is very strong, but once the Civil War starts, it's going to be a free-for-all. If you're lucky, you can start picking off land. It's pretty easy to take Inu, or however you say it. Quests in this fall pretty quickly. Pi Ramesses up here takes a little bit of time. If you take Per Amun, I find that the AIs really focus it. Like, I've fended off multiple invasions up here while taking all their land. Bit of an AI problem. However, before you go any further south down into this area, you really want to get rid of Pi Ramesses, so you control all this area. Once you do, you'll be in a very good position. You have a choice, though. You can take the Delta, which is very fertile, has lots of food. The downside is the sea people are going to start invading soon after, and this is their favorite targeted area, meaning you have to leave an army around to deal with them sometimes. My advice, ignore them, put garrisons in your coastal provinces, and just go south. If you want to win the first Civil War, that's what you want to do. If you don't want to win the first Civil War, I still recommend taking Pi Ramesses and stuff if you can. They're not one of the major factions. They own a single province. Pretty easy to take. don't go after these. Instead, march over here and take out Beersheba and stuff and start pushing your way up into the Canaan lands up here, Megiddo and such. You'll have to deal with some strong nations, but you'll have a lot of resources. The downside is you won't have a ton of legitimacy, meaning you're going to have to be getting that through court and other stuff. Okay, so let's move on to technology or royal decrees. So you have a large web of royal decrees. They're virtually the same for all factions. The first one you want to take is longer festivals. Faction, province, capital province, +3 happiness. It's worth getting. It will keep your starting province happy. It saves you having to build a happiness building, so you have a free slot as well. Afterwards, you've got a couple choices. The +1 influence is nice because you're right on the edge of Egyptian culture. On the other hand, 1 influence is not going to greatly change things. It's probably worth going for increased food production because you desperately need food. Then you're going to want to keep pushing for resources. As great as it is to have a stronger army, you don't really need to worry about combat strength. Your army is superior, assuming you can afford a full stack, and you've kept Ramesses leveled up. You have a food building here, a food tech that enhances your... What am I talking about? You have a stone tech here, which will strengthen your stone buildings. Unless you have a stone mining settlement at this point, this is a useless tech. It's better to skip it, get the charm offensive, which will calm down the factions around you, make them less likely to declare war at you, give you a better chance of making trade deals, and once you declare for the throne, a better chance of getting vassals. Afterwards, you really want to get, depending on the undependable. Food income is very precious. Just having a ton of food allows you to upkeep more basic troop armies. Obviously, you want to use superior units, but it's hard to fight multiple enemies when you're outnumbered 4-1. Troops are what matter. Afterwards, it's worth grabbing instinctive respect for more relations with the Egyptians. If you're worried about the Canaanites, grab friendly intentions, gives you better relations with them. This line of stuff over here is really powerful, but unless you've already hit tier 5 or 6 units, you really don't need. You could gain some relations with the Hittites. The reality is they're probably not going to be at war with you at all. At which point you may want to go elsewhere. Sorry, it's being picky here. If you've got gold, it's worth snagging the gold mining. Unlike Troy, which is the most similar game too, gold does not run out, but stone does. So having a gold mine will give you gold for the rest of the game, which is nice because you need it for your elite units and to bribe and buy stuff with. Grabbing that is good if you've got gold. If you don't have gold, by and large, you can just ignore it. Technically, you could keep going up here to get wood, but I have not found Ramesses to need wood early game. Ambition choice is nice if you want to keep completing ambitions, but that's your call up there. I recommend going south, getting affinity with the forest or wood. Not that you need it, but it allows you to get a dedication slot for your general. Ramesses follows Ra, which is one of the better gods that you have early access to. It won't let me show you at this point. It's worth dedicating him to it or another general. You only get those dedication slots through tech, so it's worth it. If you want, you could focus into temples and general happiness after a general does prayer. Really, this won't help you at all. This tech here is more of a luxury than anything else. It's not that great. If you can get to power of people late game, mid to late game, when you've got max idle workforce, +20 income from all sources is amazing, as well as the reduced construction. But it's probably not worth going to it. So going here, getting resources relation, getting dedication, maybe getting gold and wood, all good. At which point you want to start thinking about the military. By that point, you've researched most of the gain resource techs. And so now you need to work towards actually being able to win battles effectively and fight in civil wars, at which point you want to build up your army. There's a nice little tech up here for stone, if you can get to it. It's nice. XP from battles for your native units is good if you're going to use locals. If you go into Egypt, the Egyptians count as locals, which is quite nice. Otherwise, you want to get meant to the army. XP from battles is really good. Outside of that, ambush defense is nice, construction, but probably you're going to want recruitment ranks, bronze, influence after sacking an outpost can really help if you're invading foreign territory. Getting another god dedication is great. Recruitment is, this looks like an amazing tech, right? Recruitment costs and upkeep. Well, the upkeep is only for tier 3 units, which is unfortunate. But the XP from battles, the reduced upkeep for level 4 units, and then the reduced upkeep for level 5. Once you start building elite units, you want these decrees. This one looks good, but remember it's when allied to a Hittite faction, so it can be difficult to get relations. Further down here, if you start to have trouble with bronze and gold, these are the two when in collapse and not. It's worth snagging. The reality is you're going to go into crisis almost immediately, and getting out of crisis will take a long time. But hey, 10% or 5% is still 10 or 5%. Further on, if you can ally with an Egyptian faction, which you start the game allied with one, but you don't have a lot of food income, if you can keep the alliance Ramesses has with his father, which is on the other side of Egypt, the additional food is really nice. And outside of that, most of these, at some point, you're going to want to get. This one, income per level 5 building. The reason this exists at all, I'm pretty sure, is if you are going to build monuments. Let's see. Administration. Here we go. A monument of greatness is a level 5 building. It costs 50 gold to maintain. That tech alleviates 20 of it. I'm pretty sure that's the only reason that decree exists. If you're going to start building high-level buildings, it's worth doing. Otherwise, working your way all the way over to trading mandate morale is amazing on Ramesses. If you can build up a recruitment center and start churning out level 8 or 9 infantry, morale and melee defense will make you unstoppable. Anyway, it's a pretty simple tree. Resource income is really important for you. More than fighting, more than dedication, you need food. Once you get food, you can start worrying about other stuff like bronze. But up until that point, focus on getting food and stone. Okay, here we are in a later Ramesses game that I was in the middle of doing. This is a good point to show that I have done the not invade the rest of Sinai, instead invade Egypt. And this is kind of what's happening. The just sheer waves of enemy units are causing a lot of trouble for my empire. Even though I'm large, the people I'm fighting are massive. It's a real pain. So let's look at the court. Now, I've already done a video on the Egyptian court and how to manipulate it, so I'm not going to go super in depth here. Suffice to say, Ramesses can control the court with ease. 2 court actions is unbelievable. You want to have a either a threaten or in general a discredit plot running whenever you can. Just remember, you can't stop a plot once you start it, which can be frustrating. I took the Viceroy of Kush. I recommend this on Ramesses, unless you go all the way over to Beersheba and take that land, Hathor and stuff, where you get gold. You're going to want a source of gold early game, and Viceroy of Kush will give you 50 a turn, which is quite nice. Outside of it, though, at some point as Ramesses, you don't need to get the Vizier position because you've got so many court actions, but making sure that you start to push people out of positions or reduce their legitimacy really helps. Like, I've got 62 legitimacy over here. Zauret, or however you say her name, she's got 132. I need to constantly be decrediting her to try and steal her legitimacy. And if I succeed, I get 6. That's the big push there. Now, in terms of manipulating the court, you always want to be doing both actions or even selling them for gold. But the legacy now becomes an important choice for Ramesses. The game recommends Thutmose the Conqueror. This is worth it if you have access to gold. Most of these stuff have cost gold. Cost 100, cost 100, cost 100, cost 250 in this case. This is why I said you may want to be Viceroy of Kush, so that you have gold to spend. Now, this is very powerful. It'll allow you to take a city with a smaller army than you would otherwise, and then you can pick a different one. You gain various bonuses here, as the more you get into sabotage, you can get tons of resources, which can be a good source of stone if you don't have a good stone mine, or you can gain happiness to the area once you take over the city. It's a good legacy. Ramesses is known as a conqueror. It's very strong. Your other choices are going to be building, which I don't necessarily recommend, especially if you're going to want to use it early. Most of the building sites are in the south or mid-south of Egypt. There is one up here on the coast. I believe it is this settlement here where you can build it. Egyptian monument. We can't build the special monument because we didn't pick the legacy of the builder. The other option is the trading legacy. I don't recommend it for Ramesses. You don't have tons to trade, and you're better off trying to go for fighting. The other option, though, is the legacy of Akhenaten, which I might actually recommend for Ramesses. The downside is you have to rededicate your temples, but there is Akhenaten down here, which is a free settlement, which you have to select the legacy to colonize. It's a super settlement. It's in its own region. It can be very good for Ramesses, especially to give you a foothold in Egypt. When you pick it, this settlement is empty. If you create a general and just race them down the Nile, you can colonize it, you can start building it up, and you will have a foothold that the enemies are going to want to take from you. If you put a garrison building in it and a good size army, you can threaten a lot of their lands. If they go up here to fight Ramesses in his proper land, Ramesses proper, you can crush them in combat, or you can keep them busy down here. It's a free big settlement. Why wouldn't you want it? Well, no one's going to really like you. The religious stuff is a little weird. It can be very strong if you build up. But really, you want conquering or Akhenaten. Akhenaten, I think is how you say that one. Those are the two legacies I'd recommend for Ramesses. You've got to pick one pretty early on. You're going to want to be Egyptian. There's no reason you're going to want to go Hittite as the guy who's known as an Egyptian. And trying to focus on controlling the delta and then moving south can be a strong strategy, or ignoring the delta and just racing south to gain all the legitimacy from the Egyptian lands. As you can see, I'm on turn 40. The pillars of civilization are starting to collapse. We're going to hit into the complete collapse. We've got the lack of replenishment and morale. This is why you need to build replenishment on Ramesses earlier. The sea people are getting stronger. They haven't really attacked. The nomadic tribes are starting to cause trouble. We've got some problems. Now, reason I recommended Ra as a dedication, if you devote Ramesses to it, which you probably should, melee attack and defense go up significantly for that army, meaning his actual army here, which I have been fighting to control things with, if this is him, is very powerful. One-on-one, this army can beat almost anyone else in the Egyptian Civil War. The problem is it's never one-on-one. It's like 2 or 3-on-1. And as you can see, I own a lot of land. I have a secondary army of 4 troops, and I'm still losing food. Ramesses struggles with food hard. Oops, sorry, that's not what I wanted. I wanted to pull out the royal decrees so you can kind of see this is the path I do recommend for Ramesses early game. Later on, pick what you want. At some point, you're going to get a lot of them, but just be aware, at some point, the sea people will come. The Canaanites will invade, and becoming Pharaoh early on, which I'm not going to do so, may have its own problems in the sense that unless you've got a ton of legitimacy, another civil war will break out pretty quickly. Ramesses, not necessarily the person who's going to win the first civil war, but you can probably win the second or the third with your superior units. But it takes time for you to build to that point. And anyway, that's it. Hopefully this guide helps you play Ramesses better. They're a very fun faction, very fast, very hard-hitting. The downside, of course, is the lack of resources early game. Controlling a part of the Nile to gain access to the food is crucial, as well as getting another source of bronze. Getting Timnah over here makes a world of difference, as well as getting a source of stone. As you can see, stone is the big cap here. Outside of losing food, which I can get through trade, stone is what I'm lacking in to build up. It's 40 turns in. I've got this to 4, but I can't upgrade much of my lands because I have no stone. You need stone. I can hardly emphasize it enough. You need stone as Ramesses. You're pretty much the only faction that does not have easy access to stone, and you need it. Anyway, thank you guys all for watching. If it helped, like, subscribe, comment, all those good things. And I will try and make some more guides for this game in the future. Hope you enjoyed it. Bye for now.